Morning, everybody. Today is the 30th day in the month of March 2022. My name is Heritage Adisa, market analyst at Hot Forex. Quickly, as usual, we'll check through the markets, find out what the overall sentiment is, what the big stories are, what is driving markets currently, and if they provide opportunities, and then how we can take advantage of these opportunities. But please don't forget that this is just a communication material, and nothing in this communication should be considered as investment advice or investment recommendation. Users acknowledge that investment in FX and CFD products is characterized by a certain degree of uncertainties, and that any investment of this nature involves a high level of risk for which users are solely responsible and liable. What we have this morning in terms of the overall environment in the market, yes, is a more tilt towards the negative side. On the balance, the moves are not so massive, so still very, very small, but still you still have that, back and forth, back and forth. But generally, we still have a weaker sentiment generally. You look at, I had this written down earlier. I said the Japanese yen continues its strength, right, leading the FX measures, right, despite the fact that the Bank of Japan has been finding ways to pump in more money into the system by buying unlimited Japanese government bonds, right, to keep yields under control. But the reason why you've been seeing that strength in JPY is, first of all, we are approaching the fiscal year end for the Japanese economy, and that means that investment that have gone out of the country are also flowing back into the country, right? So there's also that, to round up for the year as well, that influence helping Japanese yen. Apart from that, we've seen massive weakness in Japanese yen for the entire month of March. So profit taking is also another factor there, also helping, Japanese yen so far. Now, apart from that, earlier yesterday we had reports from Fed Bostic where he was also talking about, the current strain on the economy based on tensions in Europe, the risk to demand, and was very, very overly cautious, right? Saying that he's not so, inclined towards a 50 basis point hike as well so far. And that has been one of the reasons why you're seeing weakness in the US dollar so far into the session. That's lagging amongst the major effects. Apart from that as well, the slight positives here and there on the Europe tension side, Russia and Ukraine, has also seen some weakness in the US dollar as well. I had this witness a slight optimism in ceasefire talks, right, between Russia and Ukraine, as Russia signaled that it will withdraw some of its troops from Kiev, right? And then Ukraine president also saying, yes, there's been some positives. Earlier they also mentioned, being ready to talk about Ukraine being a neutral state as well. So all of those concessions here and there have also still bode well, although Ukraine president still warned that there's not been anything concrete just yet. And then US officials, Western officials generally are still not convinced that Russia is really, really, you know, convinced of Russia's genuine intentions, right? Let's say it like that. And that has really not seen that positivity, that optimism really, really pick up ground. That overall, concern has dampened the effect so far. The euro generally is still holding on to those positives, at least it's, picking up strength against most of the major currencies, except the Japanese yen, right? Even the NZD has also seen some form of strength as well into this. But generally, right, sentiment remains overly mixed. You look at the back and forth that we've had for the entire week, it's not really been clear in one direction. And it's not really a surprise heading into month and quarter end as well. On the calendar today, there's not really so much in terms of tier one data to work with, but clearly focus remain on central bank speakers, focus remain on development in the talks between Russia and Ukraine as well. That will also be there. Equities, on the side of equities, mostly weaker on the day. US bosses, though, the US 500 and the likes are trading mostly flat to start the day. Yes, zero change on US 500. Oil prices have seen some reprieve, some pushback from the weakness that we've seen all week, right? First of all, OPEC is set to leave, OPEC Plus set to leave production at 400,000 barrels per day. Apart from that, with so much doubts regarding Russia's, intentions, right? Obviously, still stressing the supply constraints that we have currently, supply concerns that we have currently. That has seen, oil prices, for example, US oil bounce off the $100 per barrel level, and has kept most of us gains in today's session so far, but generally hasn't really done so much. There's really, catalyst on both sides of the curve, and that's why we're being a little more careful on that particular front. The VIX is lower generally for the week, but today it's trading mostly flat. So that still tilts the sentiment on the mixed side. Yes, it's generally mixed, but tilting towards the negative side. I think that's a better way to put it. The bond market has also seen, some bounce off the lows that we had in yesterday's session. That was also the lows going back to 2019 thereabout. So there's also that to pay attention to. Dollar index has remained pressured. Dollar is still weak. Euro is seeing some strength, and because of the euro weight in the dollar index, we're seeing downside in the dollar index. Right. Generally, I had this written down. I said, is it the weakest sentiment has helped Japanese yen so far? Inflow back into Japan, back into Japanese yen also helped the currency up so far. heading into fiscal year end. Bond yields also easing from highs have also helped the Japanese yen as well. So there's also that to pay attention to. While on the other hand, you have the likes of the British pound, right, still being pressured on the back of weaker or more dovish Bank of England. So there's that to pay attention to. Dollar being pressured, I'm not really convinced about that so far, but it's also there to pay attention to. And you could look out for strengthening Japanese yen against the likes of the British pound, for example, maybe the USD in terms of the current weakness in the yield that we have based on the sentiment as well. You can look at it against the Australian dollar, maybe the New Zealand dollar, or even the CAD as well, right? But one thing you want to pay attention to is most of the Japanese yen crosses are trading at support level. So if you're trying to look for further downside on yen pairs or yen crosses, you need to be aware of those levels and wait for a clearing out of those levels before you look to jump in or out of there. On the calendar, it's going to be a light one. Yes, a couple of central bank speakers, FOMC George, MPC Broadbent, as well as ECB Lagarde. Apart from that, you have US ADP job numbers. Yesterday, we had the JOLTS report, which was good. So this will also be another signal into what NFP could look like. Right? So there's that, as well as US final GDP numbers out there as well. Even inflation for Europe as well. But we'll look at that now in a bit. Now, looking at the equity space, for example, just quickly, just running through the chart to see what we have. And I'll look at JPY crosses, and then we'll call it a day from there. All right, while this loads up, just quickly look at that. Okay, I think here we go. All right, now you look first of all at the equity space, for example, you'll notice that overall, this is today, 30th of March, from the AUS side, really nothing much going on here. You look at the German DAX as well, tilting lower, pointing to more negative side on that particular front. The US index, the UK 100 as a FTSE also not barely done anything, but yes, chopping moves, but generally balanced on the downside in today's session. JPN also pushing lower on the back of JPY strength as well. So there's also that to look out for. Look at the front, FRA 40 downside, on the US side, now it's even tilting lower. We started the day mostly flat and haven't not done much, but now we are tilting to the downside as well. All of this pointing to a generally more weaker sentiment. On the bond side, bonds, let's jump down now. We've seen bonds bounce off the lows of yesterday as well as the low of the previous day. That was a Monday, and that level has not been seen, right, since way back as going back to like 2019 thereabout. That has been a low level. Clearly at these levels, nothing is surprising if we get a bounce, which we've seen so far. And so far, that bounce has held into this session. We're still keeping high, right? And with bonds pushing up, obviously, clearly that pushes yields down. Clearly that even points to a more negative or risk of, sentiment that we have currently. The VIX, though, is not really doing so much just yet, although now starting to peak higher, up about 2.30% on the day. That clearly says, sentiment a little bit dampened so far in the session. For oil prices, generally, we're still seeing that back and forth, right? It played out in yesterday's session and today's session as well. We're still having that back and forth, although we bounced off the $100 per barrel level, in yesterday's session, which was also a key previous level of, support turned resistance as well. Support, right, in the meantime. And then that has seen a bounce so far. The back and forth in terms of the tensions here and there, supply constraint, OPEC doing their own, hasn't really given us so much confidence, right, in the moves that we have so far. But it's what we are saying is what we have. The dollar index is pressured, has been pressured for, for the entire week. It's still pressured in today's session, although you want to also be careful of the support level that we're trading at right now, which is also clearly yesterday's, lows. You look at how, it's also been trading for a while now. That level has also, let's just go back a bit. We'll come back to clear that out a bit. That low level has also been, let me just see if we can clear this out. Naked chart. All right, just to make it a little bit cleaner for us. All right, look at the dollar index. This level that we're trading at right now has also been, lows going back to 17th of March, even very close to the lows of, 10th and 7th of March as well. So clearly, yes, downside in the dollar index, but because of the levels you're trading at, it becomes a little bit tricky to try and chase to the downside. Now, looking at the likes of the Japanese yen, right? You want to look at Japanese yen. In as much as, yes, we could talk about Japanese yen strength so far and heading into month end and even their own fiscal year end is also good, in terms of inflow back for Japanese yen. But where we are trading currently makes it a little bit tricky. You look at the likes of US JPY, we are trading bouncing of this key support level going back to the 25th of March, as well as resistance going back to the 22nd of March. So in as much as, yes, there's downside, this levels make it a little bit tricky to try and jump in. Although you look at today's session as well, we've bounced back towards yesterday's lows around the 122.00, and we are seeing downside. That can still be interesting, but until we clear out these levels, I wouldn't look to chase this lower, from there. You look at pounds JPY. I like this one for further downside because there's been some weakness on the Bank of England side. And then you look at how we've traded here as well. We've also bounced off. Just take this out and then move it back here. Right? There's a key interesting level here that you want to also pay attention to. You notice that it was also the previous highs, lows, low as well. Also, we broke below it, yet in today's session, we've come back and we've tested. I still like downside here, but because where we're trading right now is still very, very close to this overall support level around here, it just makes it a little bit tricky for me. I don't want to be seen, selling into support levels right now. So there's still that to pay attention to. We look at it against the likes of JPY, support level here as well. Let's just take this out. Support level here as well, where we are trading currently. I mean, it still makes it a little bit tricky. You look at it against the likes of, I think I've mentioned USD. I've mentioned USD against the likes of AUD. Let's look at where AUD is. AUD JPY. Just a quick one before we run away. Can find it here open. Okay, let's just get it open up. AUD JPY, AUD JPY, AUD JPY. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, sorry, that was an error. Let's just get back on track. All right, so AUD JPY, for example, you look at where we are right now. We're currently trading into support levels as well. So, I mean, all of this makes it a little bit tricky to try and chase further Japanese yen strength to the upside. But for now, because of the overall, back and forth in sentiment heading into month and quarter ahead, it makes it a little bit tricky to jump into more high conviction short-term opportunities so far. But for now, we'll keep watching. I think in the day ahead, focus will really, really remain on central bank speaks. For example, the ECB President Lagarde. We also have a couple more on the wires. We talked about broadband from MPC, as well as one again from the FOMC as well. That's George. There's that to pay attention to. But later in the day, we're expecting GDP numbers, final numbers for the US. So since it's final numbers, not preliminary, I don't expect so much from here. As a matter of fact, markets are expecting just exactly as it came out the previous time. So nothing here to watch out for. ADP job numbers will be interesting, at least as a signal before NFP. But we'd like to see what that says. I don't expect in recent time, it's not really been a good predictor of what NFP ends up being, but clearly you want to pay attention to that as well. But generally, not so much on the calendar to look out for. I think sentiment, focus remain on sentiment generally. Focus will remain on central bank speakers, remain on developments on the Europe side. But for now, I think patience is really, really a way to go in today's session. But let's see if there are any further developments. It will be interesting. Yesterday we talked about pounds, euro pounds as a currency pair on our mind. Let's just look at that, where we said that we are interested in this particular pair, looking for upside on this particular pair. We just talked about it on Monday during the morning show on Top Radio 90.9. And then we said that clearly upside on this particular one will be interesting after we've cleared out. Let's just see how we can clean this up a bit. Just before we go, after we cleared out this level, right? That if we can get a retest of this level, we would like to see further upside on this particular one, or even a deeper pullback. Clearly, from yesterday's session as well, when we had that positivity in terms of the consensus from Russia and Ukraine, that supported the euro. Pounds has been weak, really, and then we just saw a solid push up in the likes of the euro pounds, 100 pips up on that particular one. I still like upside on this pair. There's really not been so much changes there, and I like it because right now we're also clearing out this key round number around 0.845. You look at where we are currently, that level has been an interesting one going back to middle of 2021, around August, like previous resistance here again, even in the middle of March. And now we've cleared that level to the upside. A retest of that level could also be interesting for that upside as well on this one. Best to help with this is if we can get that positives continue on the back of Russia and Ukraine side. That will be interesting for us as well to pay attention to. So we're going to leave that right now. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and we'll always do our best to help. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of your trading session. Bye for now.